Hello and welcome to Firearm Freedom. This is going to be a video about PCCs. As always, there are some links down in the description. This is not a sponsored video, so if you guys wanted to support what I do here on the channel, the best way you can do that right now is by picking up some awesome t-shirts. I got 8 new t-shirt designs that you guys seriously are going to love. That link is the first one down in the description. I wear mine all the time, and I seriously appreciate you guys repping the brand. If you want to make sure you're not missing out on any of these videos on the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, hit the like button, comment down below. Any of those things should help keep these videos popping up in your subscription feed, and I greatly appreciate the support. This is going to be an interesting video, and I'm going to try to come at it from as unbiased of an opinion as possible when we're talking about PCCs. But the primary thing that we're going to be addressing in this video is, are pistol caliber carbines still relevant in today's world? Is it just a cool factor thing, or are there still some practical purposes that you could get a pistol caliber carbine for? We're going to try to address those in this video. First and foremost, I'll name all of the guns that are on the table here, and each and every one of these has had a video individually on the channel. So I will try to post the cards for the videos up in the right hand screen if you want to check those out. Some of them are going to be very old, but you can see these guns in action a little bit more. Starting from left to right, I have my Velocity LLC VMAC9. This is kind of a cool Mac 11 clone that's just recently debuted in my movie guns video, but really cool little pistol. For this video, we're going to kind of look at a pistol like this if it were to have a stock and just had this overall length. So just kind of keep that in mind. Of course, in this configuration, it's not that great, but if you imagined it with a stock, that's kind of going to be what we're going to be talking about. The PTR 9CT, there's like a 5-part video series on that on my channel. In this case, we have a collapsible stock on this, which is an SBR. And then I also have my IMI Uzi Model B. This is a phenomenal pistol caliber carbine, and it is also very collectible at this point. Now, the one thing I do want to mention about this Model B is that this is a fake dummy barrel for display up in the front. Just once again, imagine it with a short barrel for the discussion in today's video and when you're seeing it in back roll shooting footage. We also have my brand new HK SP5. This is still in pistol configuration. And we also have a CZ Scorpion here. Now this is SBR'd with the ACR stock on the other side. But I have a wide variety of PCCs, from retro to more modern, and there are also a lot more guns in the PCC world that I do not have here on the table. Some honorable mentions would be, of course, the SIG MPX, the Strybog, there are B&Ts, there's a lot of different guns out there. What do I like about PCCs? So if you couldn't have guessed it already, for me, a pistol caliber carbine a lot of the time fills a very nostalgic role in my collection. You guys are going to notice with the roller delayed guns and of course the blowback Uzi here and the direct blowback Mac 11 clone, I really like 80s guns, and it just so happens that there were a hell of a lot of PCCs all throughout the 80s and especially in 80s movies. So when I was growing up as a kid, I was seeing all of these different awesome pistol caliber carbines floating around in the movies, and I loved every single one of them. I loved the look of them, and these were a lot more popular back then because it was very difficult to get a usable rifle in a small, compact package that still had a powerful rifle round. Now, a lot of comblock calibers really successfully did this, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. But I think one of the primary reasons why I have pistol caliber carbines in my collection, at least, is for the cool factor. And I think if we look at cool factor, pistol caliber carbines most definitely have it, depending on which ones you get. When you are looking at older technology of a pistol caliber carbine. This is why I really wanted to bring the Uzi to the table, because I think the Uzi is a prime example of older technology in the firearms world. So the Uzi as a submachine gun is an open bolt, and it was a very reliable submachine gun. The other thing that the Uzi had going for it was a very controllable rate of fire, and you guys can see here a very small overall package. The stock is folded underneath in this configuration and can be deployed just by simply hitting the stock and pulling back to the rear, and you have a very quick to deploy stock. Now, on top of it being quick to deploy, you really did not have to deploy it in order to fire the gun. You could obviously still get to the pistol grip and fire the gun with the stock in the folded configuration. Now, if we compare this here to the MP5, we have about the same overall size as the standard MP5 does with a stock folded. When we're looking at the PTR with a collapsible stock, you can see even with the stock collapse, the Uzi is going to beat it out in overall size. So this is a very compact gun, and at the time, that's huge. If you were doing anything clandestine or anything like that, having something that you could fit like a boss underneath a suit jacket with a shoulder holster, this was definitely able to do it, and that was pretty cool. Once again, rifles at that point had very long barrels, and a lot of the time they were large overall guns. It was kind of in that transitional period. I do still think the Uzi, and this is going to be somewhat of a common theme here with PCCs, can get incredibly small and compact for a PCC even in today's world. So this would be one of the very small examples where an outdated or more outdated piece of technology in the firearms world, like an Uzi like this, actually still might have a little bit of practical purpose in today's world. If this was a lighter gun, I think being able to stow this away in a small bag is much easier than pretty much any other rifle you're going to see. There's not a lot of other things that can get caught up in a bag, so this would be one example of a PCC that really could still be relatively practical. Now, you could take that same example of small and compact when we are looking at something like a MAC-11. Now, if you're looking at a MAC-11 clone like this VMAC9 here, or anything else, if you had this example with a stock, once again, this is where I think a PCC can kind of shine a little bit. It has such a small overall package that being able to keep it in a compact bag where you don't even know it's there and still have the ability to get 4 points of contact on your firearm rather than just 2 with the standard handgun you might have on your person. Not only is this a practical purpose when we are looking at military law enforcement applications, but also I think as a civilian application as well. Having something in an EDC bag that allows you to get more accurate shots at a longer distance if needed is nice to have. Now, we can take this technology into modern day with stuff that I don't have on the table, like some of the flux defense options where you can drop, say, a SIG 320 into a stocked or braced chassis that really gets a PCC into this small of an overall package. Now, you have the ability, once again, to use the same ammunition, typically, that is in your concealed carry handgun, and you have now a short compact package. You got 4 points of contact, and if you need to deploy it quickly, you can. And that allows you to get shots on target that are a little bit further away. So first point that they have going towards them is you can get a PCC smaller than you can get a rifle. That's the reality of it. A lot of the times they are direct blowback guns, and with a direct blowback design, you just don't have as much going on. You don't have a big buffer tube in the back half the time, and that's the one main benefit that I still see, even in today's world, even looking at a very old design, has merit. We can see that when we start looking at larger PCCs, like something like this MP5 design or a CZ Scorpion design over here, we're getting into a much larger gun, and that's where we start kind of getting away from the overall benefit of a PCC. Back in the day, these were still considered incredibly compact, but if we take this in today's world and I extend the stock out, That's a really long overall package. I mean, I would say that's almost getting to the same length as like a 10.5 5.56 AR. Now, that is going to have a lot more capability in just the overall cartridge. So this is where, we're looking at this design, and is there really still a benefit? Are you really still getting anything when you have this large of an overall package and you have about half of that effectiveness, anecdotal, at, let's say, 100 yards, if for whatever reason you needed to reach out that far. Now, this becomes extremely apparent when we are comparing it with small AK variants. Even when we're looking at something like an AK-104 variant, or when you're looking at something about the size of a crank AK, this is incredibly short, incredibly small overall package, and you have a 7.62 by 39, which is still a very effective, ballistically, cartridge out of a shorter barrel. So once again, that's where in modern day, you're really starting to see the ineffectiveness of a PCC. When we're looking at direct blowback 9mm, the Scorpion is not necessarily the worst at this. It tends to handle recoil actually pretty well, especially with the stock on there and the vert grip up in the front, overall weight. Recoil is not terrible in that. But this is very apparent when we're looking at a lot of the AR9s that are out there. I had an AR9 originally. I ended up trading that for another gun a little bit further back. And it's not that it was a bad gun. It's just when I was comparing it to a standard 5.56 and almost the exact same overall length, it really just kind of started to not make sense for me. It used to make a lot more sense when I could get a box of 9mm for $8 or $9, but that's just not the reality anymore. And quite frankly, nowadays 5.56 is almost the same price as 9mm. So trying to look at it as a more affordable plinker just didn't really make sense anymore. And now on top of that, with an AR9 variation, straight blowback, a lot of the times you see pretty spicy recoil compared to a 5.56. I mean, it is noticeably a different recoil impulse, and not only is it a more stout recoil impulse, but I'm getting much less power and capability out of the cartridge. So that, once again, it doesn't really make all that much sense in my opinion. Now, when we are looking at the opposite of that spectrum, which is a roller delayed, properly built MP5 clone like this SP5 here, the recoil is next to nothing. This recoil's about the same as a 22. The front sight literally just slowly hovers in place as you're pulling that trigger. And even though the PTR has had a hell of a lot of issues, when this gun runs properly, again, the recoil is minimal to none at all. So that is still what I consider a good benefit of a PCC in this configuration. You have very reduced recoil. When we're comparing that to a 5.56, 5.56 really isn't going to have that much recoil either. So, again, apples to apples, but I do think there is some merit here. Another thing that we can talk about with PCCs compared to modern day standard carbines is how good they are or not good they are to run suppressed. A benefit of PCCs is a slower moving pistol caliber compared to almost double the velocity in, say, a 5.56, even out of a shorter barrel. This means that we can get these guns much quieter with a suppressor than we can with a 5.56 typically. Now, if you are using, say, 147 grain subsonic 9mm, it still may reach supersonic speeds out of that longer barrel, even if it's slightly longer like this basically 9-inch barrel here in the SP5 or the PTR. That bullet is still going to be much more quiet than a 5.56 is out of a shorter barrel, especially a 7.62 by 39. Those guns, although are relatively easy to suppress with a few minor modifications, are still going to be very loud in the action. When you look at something like a roller delayed gun like this, or even in the Scorpion, the Scorpion is going to have slightly slightly more port pop through the ejection port of noise and gases leaving the ejection port, they are incredibly quiet to run suppressed. So much so that you guys heard me say in my SP5 video that running this suppressed, even with 115 grain ammo, I felt like I did not need hearing protection. My ears were not ringing. It only was ringing if I put 2 or 3 rounds out really fast. But if I was shooting slowly, I could shoot this thing without hearing protection all day long. And if you're in a situation that for whatever reason would call for a quieter shooting firearm, that PCC is really going to be able to deliver that much more so than a rifle could. And if you're looking at small CQB situations where you are indoors, where you are within 10 to 15 feet of somebody, of course, as we know, the 9mm, although maybe not ideal, is still more than enough effective to deal with that type of situation. I know a lot of people also tell me from time to time, hey, I would rather have a pistol caliber carbine for home defense than a rifle in, say, 5.56. I don't live in the middle of nowhere, you know, I don't want it to pass through a bunch of walls, so I'm just going to use a pistol caliber carbine. And this is where I do have quite a bit of disagreement. 5.56, specifically if you're using standard 55 grain, does a pretty good job inside structures of actually breaking apart and fragmenting before it exits out the outside of the building. Now, as you've probably seen on the channel or any other channel, if it is able to do harm to a human being, it is almost definitely going to zip right through a piece of interior wall. It's not going to stop it. It's not going to slow it down. There are some rounds that do better. This is why typically a 30 caliber projectile like a 7.62x39 really doesn't do too great with the over penetration there. It's going to zip right through and keep on going. Yes, you could potentially load a PCC with hollow points, and maybe they will get plugged up with drywall and keep on going, and maybe they won't. It all kind of depends on the situation, but I think this is relatively matched. At the end of the day, with a home defense situation, no matter what type of home you are in, shot placement is a must. You do not have the ability to send stray rounds in any direction. Unless you live by yourself in the middle of nowhere, this is always a concern. You're still going to be looking at overpenetration issues through a 9mm or a 40 or a 45, whatever PCC you go with. Is it going to go quite as far as a 5.56 might? Well, I don't know. It's situationally dependent. It really depends on the ammunition in that 5.56. It depends on the ammunition in the 9mm. But once again, I have to still give this advantage to a 5.56 in a home defense situation, which is typically what I kind of have laying around. I generally prefer to have a 5.56 rifle with 55 grain for a home defense situation. I don't know that I have any PCCs scattered throughout the house. Really, if I'm grabbing a pistol caliber, it is typically in a handgun in a drawer or something like that. So this is where I don't necessarily know if in my uses the PCC makes that much sense. But again, it's really a personal preference, so you just kind of have to look at that, but in this case, the rifle would definitely beat it out. Where does that leave us with PCCs compared to modern day rifles in, say, 7.62x39 or 5.56? I would say it's very situationally dependent. For me, as I said in the beginning, PCCs are more of a cool factor thing, but I do see somewhat of a purpose as a small, super compact, and super quiet firearm, and I do think there's still some roles for that. In my uses, 7 times out of 10, I'm going to be picking up a 5.56, but there are those 3 out of 10 times that I do think a PCC of a very specific setup, like an SP5 or a Scorpion, are pretty practical. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. If you have any questions about these guns or anything else on the channel, please throw them down below in that comment section. You guys know I absolutely will get back to you. While you're down there, head up to that description for all those links. And as always, stay tuned for more great videos coming soon.